Hi everybody, this is Irene from BrainStormAcres. And today I'm going to talk with you a little bit about tomatoes. I'm going to talk about what we did this year, what we're going to do next year. Henry and I spent a couple of hours this morning working through a lot of the details, including actual planting schedules. Now, one of the things that we have to consider is we travel on business. It's not an option. I do have an online business where I provide accessories and supplies to historic reenactors. And I also wholesale to some people who do slightly later periods. I do mostly pre-1600, but I also wholesale to some people who do colonial, Civil War, that sort of thing. I can do my wholesale work online. Occasionally I need to send a sample or something, but I can do most of that remotely, especially since I already know those people. We have a long-standing relationship. The other historic reenactors that I deal with, a lot of them like to see me in person. So it's not like I can just say, oh, take a look at my picture. Yeah, they may actually want to touch something. And I don't send out samples of certain things, especially the expensive ones. So that means I actually have to haul my behind and my tent and all the gear that goes with it to some specific location around the United States. And I don't get to decide when that happens. We have events certain months of the year. For instance, this year, we will have an event in February, another in May, another in July, August, because it slops from July into August, and then another in October. It's possible we could add a couple of other ones in there, but for right now at least, that's what we're working with. Most of that is during what I'd call prime growing season. You're either seeding and transplanting and potting up and stuff like that, or you're actually harvesting and processing or something. So we spent a lot of time this year working out how we're going to do things. But first, last year, 2019. 2019 was a difficult year of the garden for a lot of people everywhere in the United States. We had bad weather. It was either too hot or too cold, depending on where you were. It was, or what time of the year it was. Like, we had a very late spring, and then we went straight from the soil being too cold to it being 95 degrees outside. We had the worst bug infestations that we have ever seen here. We had leaf hoppers, aphids, white flies, well, not much in the way of white flies, just a few of those. Flea beetles, horrible flea beetles. June bugs, and the June bug adults are not a problem. It's their larvae that eat the roots off the plant. That's a problem. You name it, we had it this year. We were able to use some organic things to control it, including we imported lacewings and ladybugs. But I love ladybugs, so that was kind of fun to actually have a million ladybugs running around. They helped a lot, but they just simply could not stand the pest pressure this year. And while the growing season was not a failure because we learned a lot, it was not what I would call a resounding success either. So this year, we suffered from the same problem with tomatoes as we did with peppers. We had our plans. We had decided on our varieties, and we decided to experiment this year. I've always grown some sort of a Roma paste tomato sort of thing. I like Romas because they make really good sauces and things like that, but they also are delicious if you just slice them and use them in salads and things like that. They're a meaty tomato with a great intense tomato flavor. We also like San Marzano because that's another one that's also a good paste tomato and generally fairly productive. But both of those tend towards having blossom end rot problems, and blossom end rot is a huge problem in our area. We have a lot of calcium in the soil, but it is not available to the plants because we are so alkaline. I learned that the hard way when I first moved here and learned how to combat it to a certain extent. We figured choosing varieties that were known to be resistant to blossom end rot wouldn't hurt. So instead of my usual Roma, I chose Granadero, which is another type of Roma, but designed specifically for heavy field production and is supposed to be resistant to blossom end rot. Watering problems can also cause blossom end rot, so having something that's resistant to those kind of problems is a good thing. We decided to go with Big Beef, which is a type of Beefmaster tomato, but it's got more disease resistant. It's an F1. Pisano is a San Marzano, which is, again, a paste tomato. And it also has a reputation for being very good in the greenhouse. It will easily self-pollinate. Since we've been having problems with pollinators in our area the last couple of years, that seemed like a good choice too. Gardener's Delight is our very, very, very favorite cherry tomato. Gardener's Delight we got from Totally Tomatoes. Extremely prolific, nickel to quarter size cherry tomatoes in huge trusses. So you have this little branch thing that's just full of tomatoes and very intense tomato flavor. It's not like those horrible little weird golf ball things that they sell at the grocery store that are almost flavorless, or they're bitter, or they're weird. No. These taste like a full-size tomato that you just shrunk down. When I get swamped, a lot of them just go straight from the plant into our mouths, because since we're growing organically, we don't have to worry about it's been sprayed or anything like that. So we'll just pop those while we're working out in the garden, and then if we do have an overabundance, which they're such heavy producers, sometimes you'll just have piles of them, I'll just toss them in with the tomato sauce. They go right through the juicer into the tomato sauce, the same as the big boy tomatoes do. And they work out perfectly fine. Now, this year we were experimenting with a variety that we had learned about through the Swedish homestead in Sweden. We had talked to Simeon, we found out where he got his tomato seeds from, and we ordered some seeds from Sweden. I used Google Translate. We translated the information on the package, and we followed the rules, and we were able to grow a bunch of plants. And our conclusion was they didn't like it here. They didn't do well anywhere we put them. They didn't like the hydroponics. They didn't do all that well. They did okay, but not all that well in good quality soil in the greenhouse. They didn't like it in the garden. Basically, we won't do them again. It was just not a good solution. There's just too much difference between where he's growing and where we're growing to make it work. And if we had unlimited space, we would probably experiment with it some more. But our goal this year is to keep it simple, work with things we are pretty confident with, just not complicate our lives any more than we have to. Then I also grew both Defiant and Comstock. Comstock I had gotten as a giveaway packet from Totally Tomatoes. It's an old variety, originally introduced in the 1980s, so it's not ancient, but it's not this past week's introduction. And it's good for canning and fresh eating and all kinds of stuff like that. Defiant is a determinate plant, which means it only gets so high, very stocky, very sturdy, and it lives up to its name. It seems to be able to survive just about anything you do to it. So that was our choice. And then the free seeds arrived. We were gifted a whole stack of other seeds. We were gifted an additional 5 varieties. We had to try them all. If I'd been sensible, I would have planted fewer, but to be honest, when you're getting seeds as a gift, you don't know how good they are, and I was trying to be proactive by planting a few extra. Well, what I wound up with was this huge pile of tomato plants and not enough place to put them. So I switched some of the stuff around in the garden. If we were a big garden that had lots and lots of space, I would definitely at least take one bed and try, 1 or 2 plants of each kind. And we'll see how it goes this summer. We still might do that. But basically, we're going to revert to some of our previous patterns. And in addition to that, we're going to try some new stuff. How you choose your tomatoes should be based on what you're going to do with them. And you can see this big pile of papers I have here. I've got seed catalogs. I've got notes from previous years. I've got notes from Henry and I talking. I've got planners. And I should actually mention the planners. You can get planners from various sources that don't cost anything. There are some fancy ones out there that they want to charge you for, but I didn't want to spend any more money. I'd rather save my money for seeds and pots. We're going back to where we came from. We're going back to the varieties that we had spent hours deciding on. Now, you might ask, how could you spend hours deciding on it? Well, this, for instance, Totally Tomatoes. The first 40 pages of this catalog are tomatoes. 14 and a half pages of peppers. And then it goes on to cucumbers and a couple of other things. They don't carry a huge selection. They specialize in specific types of plants. That's just one catalog. You know, Johnny's has got the same sort of thing. And one of the things I like about both Totally Tomatoes and Johnny's is they give really good horticultural information. Okay, it'll give a basic planting thing on what the requirements of tomatoes are, when you should plant them, things like that. But each one of these varieties, it's got the name, whether it's an F1 or something else. Then it has resistance codes. So it tells you what diseases the tomato plant is naturally resistant to. So this is kind of as if you vaccinated it somehow, you know, like that's already built in. You don't have to do anything to it. You don't have to use any inoculants. You don't have to use any sprays. It's already built in there. They've got a list of resistance codes, 18 lines long here, that includes everything from various types of fungus to nematodes to viruses. If you live in an area that has those problems, choosing the right variety can be the world of difference. It also gives you the days to maturity. Now, I have a problem with the days to maturity. And Henry and I had a long conversation about this morning. When I plant a radish, it'll say, crunchy radish, 35 days. That means that in 35 days, I will have a radish that I can actually eat. Doesn't work the same way with fruiting plants. If I use my planting planter here, for instance, for tomatoes, it says number of weeks to start the seeds before setting out date. Tomatoes. For our growing zone, 6 to 8 weeks. Okay, so you have to know when your last frost date is, and then you have to work back from there. That's just the amount of time. So it takes 6 to 8 weeks for that plant to get ready to be put in the ground. That means even though it says something like 65 days, you're not going to have tomatoes in 65 days. You're going to have a plant that's going to be ready to put out in 6 to 8 weeks, and then the 65 days goes on top of that. So I think that's kind of one of those annoying things that can kind of screw you up. So I'll be doing another video talking about how we're planning to wing it this year. As I mentioned in my pepper video, I think it was the pepper video, and when I've mentioned it before in other videos too, we need to travel on business. It's not an option. It's not, we're not going on vacation. We try and do something cool every time we go, if possible. And we try and video it so that you guys can see something that you might not ever have seen otherwise, because we drive through some interesting areas of the country, and sometimes there's something pretty cool there. It might or might not be worth going there just to see that thing, but if you're driving through, it makes sense to stop and see it. Maybe that sounds odd, but we did something on the elfin forest near where my daughter lives. It's incredibly beautiful. I wouldn't necessarily drive there just for that, but since we were in the area, it made total sense to take advantage of it. It's one of those natural wonders that you just can't pass up. But anyway, back to tomatoes. Because we have schedules, We have to figure out how to work around them. And everybody has that. If you know you're going to take a trip somewhere, if you know that during some time of the season, I remember when my kids were young, you know, we had soccer, we had figure skating, we had cheerleading, we had all kinds of things that I needed to work my schedule around. And sometimes that meant trips, sometimes extended trips. That means you got to have somebody there to take care of stuff. So you need to work around all that. If you know that you like to go to a big family reunion every year for the 4th of July and you're going to be on for 2 weeks, well, you're going to have to work around that. So learning how to plan that sort of thing is an important part of growing. Anyway, I hope that my ramblings on this topic will help you understand at least how we chose our tomatoes and what we're going to do this coming year. 2019 was a toughie. And honestly, if I'd been a beginning gardener, I'd probably be thinking really hard right now about whether I want to do another garden this year, because it wasn't a total disaster. It wasn't a total loss, but it was rough. And although we learned a lot, learning a lot doesn't necessarily put any groceries on the shelf. And that can get kind of old sometimes when you feel like you've put in hundreds of hours of labor. I did get a really nice flower harvest this year. And our early harvests were great. It was just the later stuff that was really not a total fail, but not a great success. You guys need to keep on growing. You need to keep on experimenting. Don't hesitate to contact a half dozen companies and ask them for their catalogs if you want to. Once you get onto the catalog list, they usually send them to you for several years, even if you don't order for them. And if you do order, then sometimes some companies will sell your name. I haven't had that problem with Johnny's. Somewhere along the line, somebody sold my name because I did at one point was getting like 12 catalogs. There are a few companies out there that don't give the good catalogs out to ordinary folks. You have to buy one. I won't spend that money. It sounds cheap maybe, but $10 for a catalog, and it will buy me a lot of seeds. And I could go to some place like Johnny's and get a huge amount of information for free online. And I'm not saying you need to do it from Johnny's. There's lots of other good companies there. And in fact, I actually encourage people who live in unusual climates. There are specific companies that specialize in seeds for your part of the country, and I really recommend those. A lot of times your regional seeds companies, they know what's going on, and you can sometimes call them and get information and get suggestions. Whereas if you're dealing with a giant national seed company that doesn't even know where your state is on the map, hardly, they might be a little less helpful. Anyway, have a great day and keep on growing. It's time to get those seed catalogs in and start planning for the year. So until later, we will have you guys like and subscribe and hit that notification bell. And we will be seeing you later. Have a great day. Bye.